Hello, I'm Bernarda Korez from University of Maribor Library. I'm very pleased to announce in the last session today, when we will hear how open science works in action, the first speaker will be Luca de Santis. He is coming from Italy, from company Net7, and he is also a technical leader of GoTriple Platform. So today he will introduce to us fair data in social science and humanities and how this works in GoTriple Discovery Platform.
Luca holds a computer science degree from University of Pisa, and it's involved in many research and infrastructure projects. I met Luca first on the project Triple, where he was the main technical person for building, I think, really revolutionary platform for discovery platform, which is multilingual. And actually, Croatian is one of the languages implemented on this platform. Okay, so you are ready?
Yeah, okay,
Please,
so
the floor is yours.
good afternoon, everyone. So thanks again for having me. I'm really honored, and thanks again, Jadranka, for this invitation. And as Jadranka said, we met for the Triple project, and in Triple, the main outcome was the GoTriple platform that I'm going to present now. Actually, I'm going to present the fair journey towards fairness of GoTriple. So I guess that everybody here is more than aware of what FAIR is, and it's interesting that from the article of 2015 in which the principles were elaborated, afterwards came some practical instructions on how to implement FAIR. So we have the FAIR data maturity model of RDA with indicators, priorities, evaluation methods. We have the EOS metrics. And in the latter document, for example, there are some very interesting concepts that I would like to highlight to you today. The first is that FAIR is a journey. So it's something that evolves over time. So of course, if you can make it right from the start, that would be awesome. But actually, it's something that as long as your project evolves, even the needs evolves, and you are going to learn about actually what implementing FAIR means. Another thing that I like very much of this document is that every community should define their own way to implement FAIR, because there are diversities of languages, of scientific domains, practices, etc. So, as I said, it's good to plan in advance, but at the same time, you should not be scared of failing because mistakes happen. And actually, this is what I'm going to also present to you in a very honest way, the good things that we did in GoTriple, but also the mistakes that we did, hoping that actually this can be useful for those who are going to implement FAIR. So one last thing is that, well, if you look at the FAIR indicators, most of them are very technical. I am an IT person, so when you look, for example, that you need standard protocols, certain vocabularies, linked data resources, etc., is something that IT people should implement, but at the same time, so it's very important to put IT people in the loop early on, but at the same time, of course, it's not something only IT related, and I guess you know more than well that. So what actually has happened in GoTriple? So step by step and without hiding the mistakes, but also highlighting the good things in my viewpoint. So first, GoTriple was the main outcome of a research project called Triple, which ran from 2019 to March 2023. From a technical viewpoint, it's a search server, but it's a dedicated search server for the social sciences and humanities. It's multilingual. It's a discovery platform where users can find articles, data sets, other researchers, projects, or related to the SSH domain. Behind we have a configurable harvesting platform which gets data from a lot of sources. Right now we have more than 1,300 sources that we harvest regularly. So if you're not in GoTriple and you have a repository, please come to me, because I'm more than eager to try and see if we can ingest your data as long as it's SSH related. So we have also of course, big repositories that it's harvested by GoTriple, like Base, DOJ, OpenAir, etc. But you also have Croatian sources, for example. And we have services for registered users. So if you're into SSH and you're not in GoTriple yet, please visit gotriple.eu and create a profile. So let's see how we addressed FAIR in GoTriple. So let's start from the findability and accessibility. But for a moment, let's forget about the persistent identifier, okay? Let's forget it for a moment, and I will explain why. So if we just ignore this one for a moment, for the rest, I'd say that GoTriple was quite successful in implementing the FAIR principle. The FAIR principles, we have rich data models. Our main entities are documents, projects, and authors. We provide an enrichment of the metadata that we received. The original identifiers are maintained. We index everything in a central search engine, and we have interfaces both for humans and for computers, so also machine actionable interfaces to get data from GoTriple. And yeah, let's say that we ensure long-term accessibility as long, of course, as GoTriple will live, and I hope we will have a long life. And we only deal with metadata, so not, for example, we just have bibliographic descriptions and not the full data of the article. Another thing that I would like to stress out, and it's not really, of course, a FAIR principle, but if we speak about accessibility, that is making the result of research as accessible as possible, I would also like to stress this one. We tried also to automatically translate the textual description in English when they are not prepared and present in the metadata. And of course, we use an automatic translation service. So this one is an example for Croatian, and I hope the translation is okay, because we are using a free service for research infrastructures like GoTriple, and which works quite well. But not, of course, it's not completely bulletproof. There are some mistakes, some texts that do not get translated, etc. But again, we are talking in English now. I'm not a native English speaker, and many of you are not, but like it or not, English is a sort of modern day Esperanto. So guaranteeing an automatic translation is another way to improve accessibility and comprehension of articles, scientific outputs that is maintained in the original language, because another important thing of GoTriple is respecting the multilinguality. So coming to interoperability and reusability. So again, the results are quite good. We have formalized the data model into a formal ontology, and that's, I will tell you, is not something that came from the beginning. So it's something that we did in this journey towards FAIR. We use, in doing we are using vocabularies with linked data resources. And as far as usability is concerned, we maintain the original license and conditions of access, if present, from the original sources. And we have multiple data export functionalities. We have REST APIs, and everything is documented. So if you visit GoTriple and go to the footer, you will find several links to the documentation of the things that I've just mentioned. So let's analyze these things one by one. I was telling you that we did an ontology, a formal ontology, Again, this is something that happened at the very end of the project and almost by chance, because there was a colleague of mine, Alessandro Bertozzi, who was looking for an exciting subject for his master thesis. And so he decided to describe formally the triple data model. And at the beginning, the necessity was just to formalize the control vocabularies that we have created in the enrichment process. For example, for the description of data types, we were using the core resource types. So we just wanted to document not only on paper, but in a machine actionable form what we did. And we are right now still working on his thesis. We are expanding this. So right now we have multiple vocabularies also to encourage reuse. So now, what are the other things that might be reused beyond GoTriple? So these are results that makes, let's say, GoTriple fair, but possibly can be reused by the SSH community at large. First is the classification of the SSH disciplines. Actually, in GoTriple, there was this necessity to better formalize, divide the SSH world, which is a very rich and complicated scientific domain. We have assessed 27 disciplines, not starting from scratch really, but working by reusing the result of another EU-funded project, MORES. But at the beginning, this classification was not linked, was just, if you want, a list of tags on paper. So another thing that I want to say as far as reuse, we are already reusing this one, because in other Opera services, when there is the need to classify disciplines, we use the same categories. So this is an example from the Vera platform. It's a service for citizen science. And again, we are reusing this classification. But at first, they were not, let's say, machine actionable, really reusable. That's why actually we have defined a more formal ontology, which is multilingual. Right now, for the moment, we have only 4 languages, because they are the languages that we use in the front end of GoTriple. So English, Italian, French, and German. It's SCOS savvy, and every concept is linked to other vocabularies and control data sets of the web, like Wikidata, the Library of Congress, etc. And this is the URL. So also, another thing that I would like to mention that might be reused in other SSH-related initiatives is the triple vocabulary. This is the outcomes of the colleagues working at Work Package 2 in Triple. So I guess you were involved as well. There was IBL PAN, EKT, etc. So they have developed a very, very rich taxonomy of concepts related to the SSH domain. There are more than 3,300. It's in SCOS, it's in multilingual, more than 11 languages. Every concept is linked to other entities of standard ontologies, control vocabularies, Wikidata, Library of Congress, etc. And again, this can be reused. Okay, so these are the things that, in my viewpoint, were quite successful in our road to FAIR. And but this is something that should have been done better. You remember that I said, let's forget for a moment persistent identifiers, right? So this is why, because in GoTriple, the official persistent identifier is the URL, the URI of an entity, which in theory is a nice thing, because it's unique, universal, persistent, as long as GoTriple lives, of course. And it's very semantic web. It's very, let's say, standard. But in practice, actually, it's a very bad idea. But unfortunately, when we found out this, we had already millions of documents in our index. And why? Well, because this is something that I stole from Jadranka. The URL is not suitable as a persistent identifier by the community, because, of course, links might just change over time. Also, the implementation was very bad, and I'm showing you an example because besides having, say, documents instead of document, we just put the original ID of the resource that we process, which makes, of course, the URL very clumsy, very long, difficult to copy, to do whatever. We have to change characters that are not compliant with URLs, etc. So it was a very bad idea. So technically speaking, if it's fair, it's unique, persistent, etc. But really, it was a bad idea. And so what would have been a better solution? Well, actually, the idea of using the original identifier is not a bad idea, but just using with a transformation, which is what OpenAI, for example, does. Even if there are some gotchas, some complications as documented for the OpenAI graph explanations, but it's actually a good implementation. Of course, fixing everything right now that we have millions and millions of documents is not an easy task, but it's something definitely that if we have the opportunity, as everybody hopes to continue the work in GoTriple, must be fixed. The last point, during the last phase of the GoTriple project, there was a discussion about the fact that we could use as persistent identifiers something more official, like handle.net or DOI, etc. And actually, to be honest, I'm very much against this one, because can you imagine, we receive a document with a DOI and we just create another DOI. So I guess this generates a lot of confusion. So the OpenAI way, in my viewpoint, is more than sufficient. So a closing thought, actually, there was something that was discussed this morning, and I think it's really interesting. So how can we all improve metadata quality? And so the initiative, for example, of OpenAI that was presented this morning was really interesting in this sense. What's the problem? Well, the OI PMH Dublin core standard is very common. We are using it a lot. The problem is that a lot of metadata, even if it's described well at the source, gets lost. So just really a small amount of meaningful information gets passed. Well, actually, can this be improved without creating another standard or without forcing, for example, data provider to change from Dublin core to European data model, for example? Well, I just showing a couple of things interesting that might become common practices. So ways to get along on the standards, and as soon as everybody is committed to follow these steps, this can really help to improve the quality of the data that we aggregators, let's say, process. So the first one is an example and is related to keywords. Normally, keywords are just expressed like in the first line, just a string of text. But for example, the last part that I highlighted shows how you can put something that explains a better meaning of that specific keyword. So for example, if it's something taken from the Library of Congress, so you can put a URI, etc. And the same for the authors. So there is a proposal of DataCite just to put the persistent identifier of the authors there, like the ORCID number. But these are not really standards. I've seen a lot of different ways of trying to overcome this semantic simplicity. So if within the communities, we try to find common practices, and if we use some, let's say, standard artifacts that we think are useful for the community, maybe, you know, the disciplines and the triple vocabulary for SSH that I shown before, this can really help the data quality. And another thing that might help is the development, for example, of specific plugins that implements these common practices directly in the systems that we are using. So journal system, digital asset management systems. Of course, I was discussing at lunch that the stability of these the sustainability of these plugins might be an issue. So this is something to consider. But if we can define ways to improve the standard, I guess that the quality of data and the quality of use of data really gets higher. And this was my last slide. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Maybe some questions? Or are some questions in Zoom, maybe? Will you ask? It's in Zoom? No? Okay.
Okay, thanks again.
Thank you, Luca. The next one is Olga Orlić. Olga Orlić is actually an anthropologist, and today she will introduce to us fair data in field of ethnology and anthropology. Please, Olga, the next 10 minutes are yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Good day to everyone. Do you hear me? Well, okay. I will present a presentation about some implication on FAIR principles on tail in ethnological and anthropological qualitative research. And I will do it on the example of the ongoing project funded by the Croatian Science Foundation on solidarity economy in Croatia from the anthropological perspective. And I'm going to continue on the wave of the past invited speakers lecture on diversity in FAIR principle, and also I'm going to tackle the issue that we tackled in the morning, that the question that was raised, actually who will benefit from this open science and principles of open science. Before that, I will just briefly explain the project. The project is actually focused on historical and contemporary analysis of contemporary and historical data on solidarity practices that actually help to develop alternative ways of consuming, producing, and living. And some of the initiatives involved in this research include community-supported agriculture, urban gardening, time banks, ethical financing, and also open source initiatives. So this was highlighted in order to actually to understand my point, my view on the as open science as something good and needed. And also, apart from theoretical goals of the project, important ones are also the applied one in providing guidelines for implementing elements of solidarity economy into the public policy. And also what is important for the project was, and still is, strong advocacy approach. This is important to understand later on the attitudes of the interlocutors in the research towards their anonymization. Because when you are doing something that you want to promote, you don't have any, usually you don't have any particular issues regarding revealing your identity, because you are promoting the thing you are struggling for. So methodology that we used was, of course, both qualitative and quantitative, and qualitative included classical anthropological methodology as semi-structured interviews, ethnographic participation, content analysis that was related both to archival data and transcription data analysis, and also where possible participant observation. In quantitative methodology, we used online survey among the students, carried out among the students. And here I would like to thank you, Daria Consortium, because we actually found their consent form wizard very useful when creating the actually how to say, the way when the respondents actually consented to the particular way of using the data collected. So for ethical consideration for the project, first of all, our institutional ethical board had to approve the both the the informed consent, but also the proposed research data management system. That is also something that a funding agency needed to be clearly stated. So this was done, and here is the extract on Croatian. I will just briefly explain. We on the first side, we provided information for the informants, for the interlocutors, where they were familiarized in ways with how we will use the data, that we will use it in dissemination, that they in presentation, and that it will be used only by the researchers who conducted the research. That's what they signed. And the second part, we also asked actually for their signature, and we asked them if they want to be anonymized or not. That's where in most of the interlocutors in our research actually opted for non-anonymity, because they were like really struggling for, promotion of the solidarity economy practices. And they said, no problem, just write my name. I want my agenda to be clearly connected with my name. So, but also in some cases, some interlocutors were strongly against it. Some even didn't want to sign the informed consent, or were struggling with the decision to participate in the research. So here we are opted for pseudonyms, and also we offered our interlocutors the audio files and transcript, as well as the final publication, to be sent to their home address or via email. So that's also what majority of them, well, everybody in the research signed, but some opted for not participating in the research. So the ethical problem actually, which I faced in the light of the growing request from the funding agency, that not only the results of the research should be made open access, but the data, is actually that, who will actually sign the informed consent, and what kind of stories will they tell us, knowing that this data, even anonymized, will be used by, you don't know who in the future. So this is not the problem that we faced only in our research, where also some interlocutors were members of, vulnerable groups, but also in some other research. Like, for example, anthropologists, ethnologists do research not only about the, I don't know, what kind of ideas people have, that we do research about some, costumes or traditional dances, or identification processes that are usually highly regarded as identity markers or symbolic markers of the community. But sometimes anthropologists are involved in researching narratives of women who were involved in the process of in vitro fertilization, members of LGBTQ community, of women engaged in care industry, where sometimes their stories, some ladies are proud of what they are doing, but some actually feel some kind of shame because of the economic situation made them, be nurses and stuff like that. So these are questions which we have to consider when we ask our informants to sign informed consent for totally open access to data. So I'm arguing actually that not all the data should be made open source, because there is a confidentiality created in the process of research among the interlocutor and the researcher. There is the question of protection of dignity, because some research include vulnerable groups. Sometimes, as I said already, granting anonymity is the only way you could involve the person in the research. Protection of dignity, some research communities of practice as well, are very small, and even if you anonymize everything that could be anonymous, these groups are so small that somebody can recognize with, regardless of all the process of anonymization. And as I also mentioned, the interlocutor cannot be sure in which way the data will be used in the future. Maybe he has the trust in the researcher now with whom he faces, so this is an interaction. And also the question that was also raised, that we also are involving our own private data in this process. This is a two-way process where we also as a researcher share our own personal stories with our interlocutors, and that's our data can also be revealed. So these are the parts of the ethical codex of the Croatian Ethnological Society from 2013, where some of these issues I actually stressed as the code that we as a researcher have to do. It also relates to all the things that I mentioned: dignity, the confidentiality, the need to inform the interlocutor about the change of the circumstances regarding the dissemination of the data. So maybe we have informed consent from the past, but they don't include the future use of the data. That's for sure. So what are the solutions? Of course, some of the interlocutors, as I mentioned, are totally okay with sharing the data for the future. But we have to have in mind that not all of data are like this. Maybe we should put a time limit, like in the archives, for opening the data, or that there should be always an option for people to say, no, I don't want any of my data to be available ever. So this is something that funding agency should, in my mind, have on their minds when funding research in humanities and social sciences. So also, apart from FAIR principles, there are CARE principles that were first invented, so to say, for indigenous data governance, having in mind the traditional knowledge that's used in contemporary science very often in very extractive way. But in my opinion, this, collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility and ethics should be implemented to all our data providers, so to say, our interlocutors. And we should take care about how will they benefit and how do they feel about us sharing their data. That's actually my concluding remark, that actually if we apply FAIR principles exclusively on tales, we in ethnology and anthropology would end up collecting fairy tales. I mean, folklorists do that, but that's not what I had in mind. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We heard how carefully we have to be by sharing personal data. Is there any questions? Questions in the end? Okay. In the end, I'm sorry, questions in the end. So next, I would like to, we will hear to Ljiljana Poljak Bilić. She's a librarian at the University of Maribor, of Split Library, and she will introduce us into FAIR data in humanities. Please, 10 minutes, the floor is yours.
Yes. Thank you for the introduction, but I have to introduce my colleague Kristina Posavec as well. She's my co-author of this paper. So our topic is actually fairness of research data in humanities. So research data in humanities, there is some kind of mess, we have to be honest, because research data in humanities are the most diverse of all scientific disciplines, because almost any data on human activity can be considered research data in humanities, such as newspapers, photographs, diaries, court files, and so on. So sometimes the research source is also the evidence. And the boundary between research data and research evidence is quite blurry and needs to be clarified. On the other hand, the term data itself is not very popular in the humanities, and it's often stereotyped as something that belongs to STEM field, which is not, it's common misconception, because there are many things in humanities that would be considered data in other sciences, but we have different names in humanities for them. For example, we have primary and secondary sources, bibliographies, critical editions, annotations, but we don't call them data. One interesting point from literature regarding the terminology is that there is resistance in using data as a blanket term because we have that more and precise terminology to describe the research process in humanities and to make it transparent. So Christine Borgman finds that it's better to ask when something is data than what is data, because it usually involves a process in which a scientist recognizes that object, record, or any other entity can be used as evidence of phenomena, and then he collects, analyzes, and interprets these entities as data. In our research was conducted for humanities field, which includes areas of philosophy, theology, philology, history and art history, art science, archaeology, ethnology and anthropology, religious studies, and interdisciplinary humanities. Our analyzed data sets were published in cross.dabar and open air repositories. After searching and retrieving those data sets, each of the data set was analyzed independently by both researchers, and they were assigned with the name of the repository, where they were stored, scientific field, they belongs to dataset title, type, level of openness, assigned license, README files, file format, number of downloads and citations, methodology that was used in the research, their permanent identifier, and the accessibility score of each of the FAIR principles. So the question of defining research data is still under discussion, but for this research, we have chosen to go with the Daraya definition of research data. In humanities, there are all those sources and materials and results that are collected, written, described, and or evaluated in the context of a research and research question in the field of human and cultural sciences and in machine-readable form for the purpose of archiving, citation, and further processing. This definition is set broad on purpose, which is to encompass the particularities in the research of humanities and the heterogeneity in what research data actually is. So based on this definition, research data types can be various, such as images, maps, tables, text samples, and so on. From our sample, we have gathered 123 objects that were stored as data set, but only 20% of them were actual data set. The rest of them were research papers, which were stored as research data. Among 25 of the actual data set that we have retrieved, almost half of them were mixed types, mixed as textual and numeric. Besides them, there are also some softwares, application, audio files, and databases. Almost all of the data from our sample was openly accessible. There were some restrictions on the reuse. The most popular license in our sample was copyright. So all of data sets were published with copyright. Second most popular was CC BY, which is quite free and tolerable license for research data. And the third most popular license was CC0, which is not actually a license, it's more of a tool for public dedication to public domain. Now my colleague will talk about fairness.
Okay, hello everyone. So just to shift it, I will talk about the further research question. So we have used before the results, I will tell you something about the methodology and what we have used for assessment of fairness of datasets. We have used the web service Fuji tool, which was developed as part of FAIR project, and it is based on FAIR framework that was developed by RDA FAIR Data Maturity Model Working Group. So that is what we used to assess all these data sets. The assessment was based on URL or persistent identifiers of datasets and aggregated metadata that are embedded in the data landing page or retrieved from the PIT providers. Also, this Fuji tool is assessing fairness of dataset on several metrics. These metrics are listed here, so I won't read it, but you can see you can see that them there. And each of these elements of fair is assessed by 3 attributes: essential, important, and useful. And combining those all elements, the tool have provided us the score for each of elements and for overall fairness of datasets. So based on that, the datasets have been divided in each of the classification or levels: incomplete level, initial level, moderate, and advanced level. So we can see what we got. So this is our pie charts for each of FAIR elements, for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So here we can see each score for each FAIR element. For element findable, 45.5 of datasets had score 3 out of 7. So the overall score was 7 and majority of them got only 3. Also, 22.7% had score 4 and 7, and 9.1% had score 6. For accessibility, 76 of datasets had score 3 out of 3, so the highest score they got. Then 21.4% had scored 2, 14.3% had scored 4 and 7, and 7.1% scored 1. The lowest score had the reusability. So because 50% of datasets had scored the lowest score. Okay, we don't have much time, so I will exceed. Okay, these are the overall informations about our findings. The bar chart on the left shows the fair level of fairness for each element, and on the right we have a pie chart that shows overall fairness. We can see that the majority of the data sets are in initial level. 38.5% are moderate, and only 7.7 are on advanced level. Our conclusions are, for the first research questions, as my colleague has said, from 223 objects, just 20% are actual data sets. Majority are mixed type data, so the majority contains textual and numerical data, and 28% of them are just numerical data sets. Second research questions give us answer regarding the openness. So 92% of data sets are openly available, but 34.6 are licensed with copyright, and only 11.5 have CC0 license that is most suitable for data sets. So, and the third question about fairness give us insight into the level of fairness of datasets. We can see that all datasets are aligned with the FAIR principles, but majority of them are on initial FAIR level that is very low, and just one dataset from from our sample had scored 83%, so that was the highest score. The most frequent percent was 29, which equals to the initial level. That confirms that the lack of research data documentation and metadata elements is lacking, and this is the essential part of the FAIR principles and FAIR data. And the last slide for the limitations in future research. So the major limitation of this research was to find repositories and databases and systems that that have great search functionalities and filters. So because of that, we choose those free databases systems, Dabar, Krozda, and OpenAir, because through them we could filter our results and our data sets to humanities field. And we used the Fuji test. So if we used another fair assessment tool, maybe the results would be different. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. The next, I would like to introduce Radovan Vrana. He's a lecturer. He comes from Faculty of Humanities and Social Science at University of Zagreb. Today, he will introduce us to the role of research data and research studies. So please, the next 10 minutes, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello to everyone. I'll try to sum up a research study conducted this summer. The main idea was actually to find out what Croatian researchers think about some aspects of use of research data and storing research data. However, due to the lack of time, I think that the only part of results will be presented here. As you can see from these introductory points, most difficult part for researcher is to find out where and how to store data and where and how to use other scientists' data. So it takes lots of time every time you want to store your own data, as we just heard in presentations before mine. And later on, if you want to find out about someone else's research data, it's also very difficult sometimes to find and to use this data. So I started a research study focusing on facts about sharing, use, and storing. This data, I chose 28 questions in total, 25 closed and 3 open. And I used a convenience sample and snowballing because it was impossible to stratify people that were on on the mailing list of the Croatian researchers. So there are people who are full-time researchers, there are people who are part-time researchers, doctorants, and so on, doctoral candidates. The research study was available for 2 months, the whole summer, and 650 respondents participated, at least in some part of this questionnaire or survey, because not all questions were intended for all researchers. So there was first the filter, who is actually using research data of other scientists and who is not using. So as you can see, according to these results, an impressive percentage of 73% of the respondents claim they are using other people's data, research data for their own work, which is really impressive. Then I did a breakdown on these results to see what are the areas of science in which they are using other people's data or their origin exactly. The most respondents who are using other people's research data came from tech sciences, technology sciences, humanities, and social sciences. Then followed by natural sciences and other parts or areas of science. This classification is taken from the legal documents of the Republic of Croatia. This is our official list of areas of science. It might be different in other countries. Next, I try to see the gender, who is more inclined to use other people's research data, and these are the female researchers, much more than male, and some respondents refused to reveal gender, which was also an option. Then the bottom graph shows actually the years of service in research. So most people share data when they're around middle of their career, and there are more female researchers using other people's data. So these are the results that came up in this research study. I also asked them about the frequency of use of other researchers' data plus reasons. So you can see two main reasons as a template for next research that can be prepared based on the research data, and quality check or quality control of other research studies and research in general. So as you can see, the people or respondents use other research data sometimes as a template and as a quality check. There is a significant number of them who did that rarely or never. And of course, some next research would be ideal to ask them why. What are the reasons that because of which they never used research data for these purposes, and of course, on the other part of the scale, what were the reasons or motives to use research data. For those who did not use other people's research data, I prepared several questions. The first one was why. So what were the reasons why they are not using other people's research data? These are 133 out of 650. And as you can see, they indicated that they had no need of other people's research data. And there are other answers. This is the open part of the question, in which they usually, again, said that they don't need such research data, that had problems with research data and so on. So there are other obstacles like membership in some institution in order to gain the access, paywall, password, license agreements, the user interface was too complex to use, and different languages, which is the least frequent obstacle. Here's the importance of research data in 4 areas. So according to the of course, importance of not important at all, and 5 most important. So ideas for starting a new research based on someone else's research data, preparation of such research, implementation, and later on the quality check. So as you can see on this scale, we have from middle values to more frequent or more important values. And only one reason is highly elevated. This is the quality check. But I seriously doubt that people use other people research data to do the quality check day in, day out. So this is something that I suspect that this is actually not quite so. But of course, some more perhaps interviews or something like that would clarify this result. I forgot to mention that the participation in the research study was anonymous. So no one had to reveal the identity, no IP address was recorded, and so on. So the anonymity was guaranteed. Have you ever tried to repeat the research based on someone else's research data? And these are quite interesting results. 579 participants, yes. 16%, yes, but I succeeded to manage and get the ideal. Identical, not ideal results. 90%, the first one was not identical, and 2/3, roughly 65%, I said no. So we had roughly 1/3 of the respondents here who actually did try to repeat, that the reproduction of other people's research is a big problem. So I asked them also to say if they were offering open access or access to their data. Yes, most of them to all research data. Next, the following no, which is also a high number. So yes, but there are some partial access. There is some formal access not listed here because I only asked if there were any restrictions like password, IP address, and so on. But these results also give you a fair insight into what people actually think about sharing their own data. Have you ever received any form of recognition or reward for making your research data available? As you can see, 94% said no. So there is no reward, there is no any kind of recognition, but I think that this will change in time. And we are getting to a close. Your research data sharing problems. I listed only top 5 problems. It's a much longer list. So fear of misuse, excessive consumption of time, fear of data misused in form of the theft of authorship, technical problems, and lack of data sharing infrastructure. As you can see, they are more or less equalized, not, of course, they are not equal in numbers, but these are the highly chosen reasons why people have some troubles, and reasons from providing access, increasing visibility, creating partnerships, transparency of research, quality of new research, and inspiration. So these are also top 5. These are the reasons why would one open their data. In conclusion, this research study has more questions that the time allows here to be presented. I think that it's encouraging that people indicated they actually use other people's research data. And of course, this use varies from one area of science to another. They have different attitudes. This could be seen from the open parts of certain questions when there were actually some of people protested or said, I didn't understand the question, and so on. There was also an insult received by email from angry person from the Croatian Academy of Sciences, and so on. It was very, very interesting. And of course, the reuse is one of the main motive why I do this research study from time to time. So this opening of access to research data is actually a work in progress. The last week, I think John Wilinski from Stanford University said that the open access is going at snail pace. But I think it's not that slow, but things are slowly changing or less slowly. And with each research study, we see some improvements that are real, and people actually learning about the open access, either to publications or data or both. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Next, I would like to introduce Nataša Jermen. She comes from Miroslav Krleža Institute of Lexicography in Zagreb. And today she will introduce to us Open Access Encyclopedia, an important component of knowledge infrastructure. So please, next 10 minutes are yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Well, my intention is to give a hopefully brief presentation of the transformation of encyclopedistics in the digital age, with emphasis on the activities of the Miroslav Krleža Institute of Lexicography, especially related to its open access publishing. So, since the era of Enlightenment, encyclopedia its role actually consisted of systematization and organization of knowledge, as well as its communication to the society. And in the digital age, its enlightenment mission or role hasn't changed. Actually, it's even maybe more emphasized in the era of the ever-increasing amount of data and information. Encyclopedia in the digital age is facing fundamental changes. Namely, functionality and usability of encyclopedias are enhanced enormously. We know that digital media facilitated its distribution, accessibility, and usage. Furthermore, digital technologies enabled or changed the ways of preparing, organizing, and presenting of encyclopedic knowledge, because they allow for continuous updating and expanding of the content, as well as for collaboration between the content providers and users. And also digital technologies actually introduced the new concept of encyclopedistics by transforming the encyclopedias into platforms or portals for knowledge dissemination and networking. In addition to this, professionally edited open access national encyclopedias contribute to raising the level of public knowledge by enabling or the access to the scientifically verified knowledge in the user's mother tongue. They also provide a connection between experts and average citizens because they act as an important science communication tool. And also they play an important role in the struggle against misinformation and disinformation, provided often by unreliable digital sources of knowledge. Let's say that one of the prominent examples of the importance of the encyclopedistics in Croatia nowadays is the very existence of the Miroslav Karleža Institute of Lexicography, which is defined by a governmental act as a public institution of special interest for the Republic of Croatia, and is involved in lexicography and encyclopedistics, both professional and scientific disciplines in Croatia since its foundation in 1950. It has the mission to systematize, preserve, and communicate knowledge in the broadest span of fields and disciplines. And these editions are aimed for general broader public as well as for specialists, and are also produced in collaboration with specialists and experts in different fields. We have published more than 400 volumes of encyclopedias, dictionaries, lexicons, bibliographies, and other editions from nearly all fields of human knowledge. Medicine, literature, art history, law, economy, agriculture, to name a few. And our digital transformation, or at least some attempts to publish digital editions, began already in 1990s when we co-published several of editions with commercial publishers. But actually the real transformation, digital transformation, began in 2008 when we started with a digitization of our archival print edition. And since then, this process is taking part in these three principal directions, that is digitization and online publishing of archival print editions, then publishing of the constantly updated online general encyclopedia, and transformation of specialized encyclopedia into encyclopedic portals. Our content online openly, in open access, contains now of around or more than 270,000 open access encyclopedic entries, which in 2022, for example, had more than 15 million page views. We think that this open access, of course, enables this increased visibility and hence the potential to create societal impact. let me just introduce a few of these main collections. Portal of Knowledge is actually the collection of our archival digitized edition, which is being available online since 2009, and it contains 130,000 articles from 10 digitized editions. This portal is now undergoing some changes, change of functionalities, interfaces, and so on. And this redesign with some other functionalities will be available at the end of 2023. Let's say that the key step towards this digital transformation was online publishing of our Croatian encyclopedia, which is actually a general encyclopedia. And it was launched in 2013 based on the print editions. And for example, in 2022, you see the data, how many visits and page views this encyclopedia had. Actually, it became one of the principal digital reference sources in Croatian language with approximately 30,000 visits daily. One of the fundamental editions is also Croatian Biographical Dictionary, which is also being digitized and published online, and which is also plays an important role in some of the collaborative projects. And also a Croatian Encyclopedia of Technology, as well as a portal of the Croatian Technology Heritage, is actually the encyclopedia that is published simultaneously as online and print edition. Actually, it's published online first. So it's let's say, a rather innovative project at least in our case. And it's also brings additional metadata are extracted, which also enable further search, and also additional information at the end of each article enable also the connection with other digital sources, which is also transforming this encyclopedia into the portal of knowledge. I wanted just to briefly mention that we also have a Diamond Open Access journal, Studia Lexicographica, and that all our digitized and digital collections are available on our website. This is, to sum up, what this publicly available repository of encyclopedic knowledge enables. Actually, systematization and dissemination of this scientifically verified knowledge, and as well as popularization of results of scientific research. It also enables a connection with digital data and of other research and cultural institutions. And also, we think that this also represents a new concept of encyclopedistics, as these platforms could also serve as sort of junction points that could connect a diverse digital content from various institutions on a specific topic. Thanks to this connectivity, we also take part in many projects, initiatives, and communities which are listed here. And last but not least, I just wanted to mention the reform of research assessment, which is going on now. And let's say that in light of this reform, we think that also our encyclopedias actually contributes to some of those principles that are mentioned in this reform. That is that we know that this reform calls for acknowledgement of the diversity of scientific outputs, both in formats and languages, providing open access to publications, as well as contributing to the societal impact of research. And we think that all of these principles are actually embedded in the very core of open access, professionally edited encyclopedias. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. The last but not the least today is Tiberius Ignat. He is Director of Scientific Knowledge Service. I shall say a loud voice for open science, particularly for citizen science. And today he will introduce to us why research needs to become popular. So please, next 10 minutes are yours.
Thank you very much for introducing. Thank you for accepting this paper, which is part of practices that exist. So I'm going to present a different practice that doesn't exist. So hello, everyone. The act of eating in the 15th century was mainly a biological affair. Gastronomy didn't exist that time. Elaborate meals existed only or sat on the table or of only a few aristocrats. Very few were benefiting from this, while the normal peasantry were eating largely to survive. It wasn't like we know people eat today. Fast forward, nowadays, gastronomy is not something that is exclusive for just a few. It's something that exists everywhere. It's a popular culture. We've been introduced this morning about Zadar saying extraordinary excellence in culinary art by Professor Mariana Tomic. It is part gastronomy of our cultural identity. It was a journey from a subculture to a superculture. It moves. So my name is Tiberius Ignat. I come from year 2065, and I try to offer you a glance of what research is in 2065 and how it moved from a subculture and a culture of exclusive practice to a popular culture. In 2020s, research was in solitude. It was reserved to just a few people. We'll see, it's not because they were protecting it, and it was considered something distant from the rest of 7.5 billion people in the globe. Let's see some challenges that we're facing. One is that it was only 0.15% of population contributing to knowledge. And this was ironic because we were pushing for a culture of an economy of knowledge. So while most of the population was busy in industry, creating products or in services, it was only 0.15% creating new knowledge, with all expectations that we have from having new knowledge in the context of a knowledge economy that was promoted. This was the first challenge. The second challenge, it is related to research integrity, ethics, and is related to the solitude of research. It was an embedded, it was a closed place embedded in a restricted practice of just a few. Moreover, there were problems like 70% of reproducibility problems, studies not being able to be reproduced. It was a crisis on that. And the third, there were many challenges. There were also successes to be celebrated, but one other challenge that was influencing a lot, it was the use of research in dual technologies. That is the use of research that is meant to be to produce human progress in civilian purposes. It was used in other things like military purposes. That is the 2020s. In the 2040s, already researchers raised their voice against the dual use of their technologies. They were not so much willing to contribute to the use of their technologies to be used of a society that they don't support, of a society that could use research and technology in military. And by 2065, a global consensus have been reached in which governments were supporting through legislation a set of measures that limits the use of research other than civilian purposes. citizen science by 2065 is no longer a buzzword. It means that researchers and society come together, able to work together. Is not improper to see someone that is not trained as a scientist to help researchers. And the society is no longer just a receiver of knowledge. It is actually an active contributor to create this knowledge. Responsible research and innovation had made a huge progress by 2065, in the sense that researchers and their institutions are accountable for their work and are more aligned with societal needs. And the concept of transparency, starting with 2030, started to be clear that access to research results, to literature, for the whole population, also access to data, not necessarily open data, but access to data when it's needed. They are no longer enough to give legitimacy to research results. So just having access to results and to data was not enough. There were deep scrutiny tools that were needed to validate these research results, and even more the research integrity and ethics to make sure that they are all in place as researchers wanted to be initially. And by 2065, it is normal to see the general population participating in research, consuming, if you want, research, helping researchers. Their level of expertise, this came in at the same time in increasing the research literacy, the scientific literacy of population. Their skills, expertise that exists outside of the formal research community has helped researchers to progress faster in the direction that they wanted. So in conclusion, by 2065, we will see research moving away from the dual-use technologies. Is not only for military purposes. You can see the dual use of technologies, for example, in behavioral studies, being used for persuasion technologies. Now in 2020s, we have persuasive technologies that use studies from behavioral research without being intended to be used there. We'll see more population, increased percent of population working in research, not only 0.15% of population, and we will see some deep scrutiny tools, mostly assisted by AI, that gives a better view on the research results. So by having that is not only the benefit of the tech sector or the health sector, but is the main benefit is making a society more mature and supporting more the democracies around the world. Because ultimately, learning about the future, the best way is to cook it. So I know this presentation is not about the practice that exists today. The main conclusion is that making research open is not enough. Making research popular is the stage that we need to solidify research results and the trust in research. So that's my presentation. I finished here. I tried to squeeze in 10 minutes. So I leave it open for questions. I know that is part of a session showing current practices, and I hope you don't mind of a presentation about future practices. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiberius. Please stay here, Tiberius, and I'm inviting also all short talk speakers for a short discussion. Please take a seat here. So the floor is open for your questions, please. Yeah.
Well, I maybe have a comment more than a question for a colleague from the Institute of Anthropology. And this goes to the one thing I talked to Jadranka the other day, and one thing I think it's great about this conference is that it gathers people from various backgrounds. So we from the open science community hear arguments from researchers themselves, and it was really great to hear your examples, especially about qualitative data and their sensitivity. But on the other hand, I have to try to defend open science principles and say that although we can realize that we need to realize that there are sensitive data, there is also this phrase as open as possible and as closed as necessary. And any sensible advocate of open science will realize that not all data need to be fully open. So this is something that is quite legitimate. And I don't think that open science really pushes you into opening the data that shouldn't be open. So anyhow, I think that there are ways to accommodate all your concerns, and that there are people, even in Croatia, where you can get advice, help, and practical guidance on, I don't know, keeping and storing data in a secure environment. So I would like to invite you to use that opportunity, for instance, in Croatian Social Science Data Archive. Yes.
Well, thank you. And I didn't want to be misunderstood that I'm against open science or sharing data. I really think this is very important. But actually what I have experienced is this, so to say, pressure, not from the open science community, but from maybe the funding agency, who maybe apply principles that are applicable on STEM, where all the data are usually anonymized, just, you know, copy paste it without thinking, okay, maybe this data are sensitive, maybe here the request for opening the data should not be just, you know, put as an obligation. That's my concern. The data can be managed in a different way, as we have seen, and it can be over time, you know, when when on all the possible negative implication for the interlocutor would pass, you know, can be applied like in 50 years, and I don't know. Just, you know, you cannot simply copy paste everything for every science. And I feel, and my colleague also experienced, that humanities are being under pressure from the methodology and practices from STEM. Sciences as their way of dealing with data is the only legit way. That's my point.
Thank you. We have another question.
Yeah, thank you. Diana Shobota, PhD student, University of Zagreb. I have two questions, if you allow. The first one is for Dr. Jermen. I know that you're primarily targeting academic community, but my question is, has the digitization process and open access efforts that you've been making, has this contributed to greater let's say, reach towards and use of your publications, your encyclopedias by non-academic community, by lay people? And have you tracked this data, and especially in which research areas, which topics, especially when compared with other non-professional edited collaborative efforts, for example, Wikipedia? So how do you compare and compete with them in that regard? And my second question is to Professor Vrana, and I apologize if I missed this from your presentation. Have you identified in your research any significant difference in the use of research data, but not just in general terms, use yes and no, but in terms of different behavior aspects, attitudes, and with regard to different research questions that you try to explore in your research. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we are not aiming only to the academic community. We have a variety of these specialized encyclopedias and editions that are aimed maybe more to these specialists, but also the example that I showed, Croatian Encyclopedia, is actually a general encyclopedia aimed for a wider public, and it actually takes, I think, maybe 80 to 90% of all the visits. So this is the main digital reference source, as I mentioned. And we trace it via Google Analytics, and we also have some our internal sources to follow the visits, but it's not that we haven't done any further analysis to see who these visitors are. As for the Wikipedia, we do not compete with Wikipedia, but I have to say that many of the articles in Wikipedia do have links and references to our editions. So in a way, we do not have any kind of collaboration or anything, but some of our editors individually, they do participate as far as I know. And yeah, but I think it shouldn't be, we shouldn't be in a conflict anyway. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I think that this research study covered partially something that I would call the sentiment regarding the use of research data and common attitudes towards research data or open research data. Some of these sentiments could be seen from the open parts of some questions. The trouble is that this type of instrument cannot actually measure precisely some of the personal aspects, motivations, attitudes, fears, and so on, so precisely as would an interview do. But then it's rather difficult to get researchers who would participate in this type of research. I can certainly try. Because, as I mentioned, this research study was anonymous, so no one had to identify herself or himself. When you have a person that it's in front of you, the person can also express some fears of disclosing her or his identity, and if he or she provides an insight or opinion about some university policies and so on, this person could also feel, I don't know, some danger in expressing its own thoughts. This is what I concluded from some of the parts of this research study. Of course, as I said, it can be done, but I'm not sure that so many scientists would agree to participate in such an interview, and it would most certainly take a lot of time to do that.
Hello everyone, I'm Dana Saric from Croatian Science Foundation, and I just want to give a comment about fear of our principal investigator, that is Olga Orlić, that we in HZZ are really open for data, and we are trying to not to do what you said, to just mirroring STEMs and humanities and social sciences, because they are really different. And we are really trying to educate ourselves. I'm here to listen and learn and so on. I just want to give you a comment that don't have any fears and just be brave and give your data as you can. And we are not going to force you to do what you can't. Yeah.
It's okay, it's just a comment. So, yeah. Luca.
I know that, thanks.
What was the main challenge working with Croatian data, and what can be improved from our side to make your life easier?
Okay, so actually I'm still waiting from some sources from you, Draumira. So I guess that the most challenging thing is that we get quite a significant number of Croatian articles, but not from Croatian sources. So what I would like actually is GoTriple to pass from the present model in which we have integrated the big aggregators to go directly with the data providers, the data producers. Of course, this apparently doesn't scale, no? Because it's easier to get data from base and immediately get, 1 million documents. Wow. But at the same time, there are a lot of difficulties because for several reasons. Base are great. They are doing a great job, but I prefer just to get data from the source instead of somebody who just is in the middle, because each time we import something, we do some transformation. So it's just like, the game of telling people to the ears and then the thing is repeated, etc. So what I would like actually to do is just getting more Croatian sources in the near future.
Thank you. Tiberius, you mentioned that I really like your vision of in 2065, how the world will look like. But you mentioned journals in 2065. So you really think that journals need to survive until 2065?
Well, I can't answer to that. I don't know if it's fit or fit for that purpose till in 2065. I've mentioned access to results in terms of being published, and that will be achieved much sooner than 2065. And I think it's for many disciplines is already the biggest part. But that doesn't give enough tool for scrutiny. It was all the Alzheimer all Alzheimer studies, depression studies, opioid studies, they were open. So people had access to them. Some of them were behind paywall, but the major studies were all open. Didn't give enough scrutiny to say that it was data falsification, it was image manipulation in them. Billions of dollars went into that direction. Data was open as well, and it was only last summer after so many years when. And these are only two examples. There are many other examples. So there is more than access to data and access to publication that is needed to scrutinize research.
Thank you, Tiberius. And Ljiljana? So I was really surprised with the so great share of wrongly stated resources you analyze. So do you have any clue? What is the reason to say for your publication that it's a research data set?
We are not sure. We are guessing that maybe because OpenAIRE is an aggregator of other repositories. So maybe there was some mistakes in other repositories, and then they were shown as data sets in OpenAIRE, but they were not. They were just research papers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Actually, classifications from others, So the more actually you can get data from the source, the better data quality you can achieve.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Yes. So Tiberius, what should we do that science and research would be more popular? Give us a couple of tips.
I think there are two things. First of all, to create the infrastructure for being popular. Science pushing for popularity of science should be done in parallel with increasing the science literacy of the whole humanity. So we need to learn how science is done and what the research conclusion is, what evidence means, and for how long evidence stays until new evidence comes. That will give meaning to popularity of science. And then it's also to increase the understanding of how science is needed for human progress. And we need a set, in my humble opinion, of course, I'm back in 2023, we need a set of tools for deeper scrutiny in research that will guarantee more integrity and ethical conduct. There is also need to separate. We see now, we unfortunately live time of conflict and war, and we see more dual technologies. One of my slides, I didn't know the format, so I thought I'm gonna take questions right after the presentation, so I pretend that I know the questions that are gonna come to me. So one of my slides is showing a news from Reuters coming last week and showing dual technologies being used in conflict between China and USA, and how is predicted by Reuters that will increase the complex texture of the complex fabric of that is because research is used to create products for military purposes, and not the research team is not necessarily thinking for that. Look at high energy physics, and studies from there were also taken in military development. I don't think scientists were thinking to create a competitive advantage on military fields. So I think there is a need to decouple research from dual use technologies as soon as possible. That's so 3 factors: having more researchers, decoupling this, and having deep scrutiny tools.
If I may add,
our last comment. We need to close our session.
If I may add just an idea that is not mine, I borrowed it from the researchers and activists from the degrowth movement. How to make the research more popular? You have to engage the community, these lay people that we all talk about and from whom we extract data, in a way that we actually don't create the expert community that we are, pretend to be, or we have to create the community of experts. And this includes also the community, who will have access to our research and the control and the benefits that we offer. And then the choices might be, as you said, not for military use, not for this use, but for the benefit of society. Well, just an idea.
Yeah. Thank you, Olga. So we have 5 minutes over time. Allow me to thank once more all of our great speakers. Thank you. And thank you for great questions. And 10 minutes, the city tour will start in the front of the building. Thanks a lot, our online participants. Unfortunately, we don't have virtual tour. Maybe we can prepare something for the next year. Some virtual tour of Zadar. Yes, and see you 8:30 in the atrium of the restaurant for our conference dinner. Thank you once more.